The wind carried a lonely whistle across Lake Michigan, brushing the pines of North Fox Island as if warning the world to stay away. It was the summer of 1970, and although the island looked untouched, emerald woods, pale sandbars, and water that shimmered like polished glass, something darker was beginning to take root. Most people in Michigan barely knew the island existed. Fewer still had heard the name Francis Sheldon, a wealthy, eccentric philanthropist whose polished manners hid the secrets he carried like stones in his pockets. He had begun visiting the island with increasing frequency, accompanied not by family or friends, but by men whose smiles didn't reach their eyes and whose past held more shadows than their suit jackets suggested. Sheldon told communities he was planning an educational retreat, a place where wayward boys could spend summers outdoors, far from the pressures of city life. On paper, it sounded benevolent, even admirable. Michigan officials saw a wealthy man funding a private camp, and that was often enough. But others, like Detective Marlon Greer, weren't so easily convinced. Greer had been hearing rumors, whispers from social workers, hints from frightened kids, and reports of boys disappearing from Detroit only to reappear withdrawn and changed. Nothing concrete, nothing a court could stamp. But the threads all tugged in the same direction, toward Sheldon, toward his island. And the men around Sheldon, men like Gerald Richards, who ran an organization under the guise of youth outreach, men who always offered help too eagerly, who always had the wrong kind of interest. One August night in 1970, Greer sat alone in his car outside a lakeshore marina, watching a small seaplane prepare for takeoff toward the island. The plane belonged to one of Sheldon's associates. No children were with them, but Greer sensed a meeting was happening, something planned after dark for a reason. He jotted the tail number in his notebook, already imagining how his captain would dismiss yet another hunch. On the island, under a thin thread of moonlight, Sheldon and the other men gathered inside the wooden lodge they had built the previous spring. They spoke in low tones about transportation, secrecy, and keeping the circle tight. Their voices carried a mixture of arrogance and fear. Arrogance that their social status protected them, fear that too many people were beginning to talk. What none of them knew was that their circle was already beginning to crack. One boy, whose name is not recorded here for his privacy, had recently managed to escape the island. Quietly, to a counselor who did notice the signs, he told a story that matched a dozen others Greer had been piecing together. A story of men using the island as a secluded hub for the exploitation of vulnerable boys. A story that confirmed everything Greer feared. By the winter of 1975, the conspiracy would unravel publicly when key members fled the country and investigators finally connected the dots. But in that 1970 night, the crimes were still hidden beneath the island's calm surface, protected by wealth, isolation, and the silence of victims who were too young and too afraid to speak. Greer didn't yet know how the case would end. He didn't know that Sheldon himself would vanish overseas, or that the island would be abandoned, left to the gulls and pine trees. But he knew one thing: North Fox Island was not a paradise for troubled youth. It was a fortress for men who preyed on them, and if he had anything to say about it, their secrets wouldn't stay buried for long. Like and share for more videos like this.